Hey everyone, it's Hudson Henry, and I'm really excited to be doing another Perfect Inspiration video for ON1's Perfect Photo Suite 9. And on this blustery, freezing, rain-filled day here in Portland, Oregon, it's kind of fun to take you all on a journey back to last summer for our ON1 on location expedition in Olympic National Park. And for those of you that know me, traditionally my workflow has always been to bring a whole series of new images, like the ones that I captured in Olympic National Park, into Lightroom, organize, sort, cull, and then finish my images in ON1's Perfect Photo Suite. But now with Perfect Photo Suite 9, I just want to remind everyone I like to come into Perfect Browse 9 and use its fast preview mode to do my initial cull through all the images and get rid of those images that are out of focus or bad compositions or ones that I just know I'm not going to work on. And I do that before I ever import them into Lightroom so that I don't spend a whole lot of time in Lightroom building one-to-one previews just to throw away 2/3 of them. For this inspiration, I'm going to mostly work in Lightroom because that's where I do my raw adjustments on my images. And I'm going to showcase these images, and some of them I'm going to show you before and after images. Some of them I'm going to actually go in and show you how I used Perfect Effects and Perfect Black and White and Perfect Photo Suite 9 to really get the final look that I wanted. But this Perfect Inspiration video is really just going to be more about the inspiration of the trip that we had. Now the trip was a pretty major expedition. We were backpacking for 4 days, 3 nights camped out along this beautiful wild stretch of coast. And whenever I'm on a trip like this, I tend to carry my camera really accessible in a front holster strapped to my chest so that I don't have to slow the whole group down. I can get my camera out quick when I see something like these crazy surfers that are hiking the whole trail backwards from us, carrying their surfboards along with them. I suppose they looked at us and saw our big tripods and video equipment and said the same thing. Wow, those guys are nuts carrying all that equipment along. But I like to be able to get my camera out, use it fast, and you can see I'm using my Nikon D810 and I'm shooting with a 24 to 120 f4 lens. That's a nice kind of general purpose lens for just capturing wildlife or people or even a wider scene without having to whip my pack off and get to all my other lenses and equipment. As we were hiking along, the first thing that really captured my eye was this just beautiful piece of fresh kelp that had washed up. And I think that Andy and our friend Peter, who was along with us for the first day of the trek, thought I was crazy because here I was all focused on this just piece of kelp on a foggy morning. But I did wind up finding a composition that I really liked. And this showcases how sometimes you don't want everything in focus in your image. It actually draws the eye right back to the root of this kelp that it had been pulled up from. And I don't know, I like the soft focus on this one, so I shot it at f4. This is the raw file, and this is a good before and after to showcase just how quickly I can get my image to get a nice pop and perfect effects. Here I just simply added a little dynamic contrast, a natural setting, a big softy vignette, and used the color enhancer to just warm the tone a little bit. Simple, easy, boom, I've got that pop and that look that I want in my image. It's dramatic. This is an image of Andy Adkins. He's a great friend of mine, an incredibly gifted videographer and photographer. He's been doing a lot of these ON1 on location videos and commercials that you've been seeing. I'm going to use this image of Andy to show you how I used Perfect Effects to really improve this raw file. And the first thing I'm going to do is go into Lightroom's Develop module where I do all my raw adjustments. And I've kind of cheated that. I've created a snapshot that it pulls the exposure down just a little bit, set my black and white point, and that got rid of a little overexposure here in the highlights, and I boosted some of the shadow detail, and did a little clarity and vibrance. And now we're ready to head into Perfect Effects to really finish the image and give it that finishing look that just really makes it pop. And I'm going to control click on the Mac, that'd be a right click on the PC, and choose Edit in Perfect Effects 9. Click on that, and that's going to give me the option of what kind of file Lightroom's going to build with my adjustments built in. And I want to use a Photoshop document for its layered workflow, and I tend to like ProPhoto RGB. It's a little wider color space, a little safer to edit in. When I click Edit, Lightroom is going to build this new Photoshop document file and open it in Perfect Effects. And the new Perfect Photo Suite 9 is going to give me the option of editing this as a smart photo or a normal photo. This is an exciting new feature of Perfect Photo Suite 9 that lets us, with a smart photo, go back and re-edit anything that we did in Perfect Effects and Perfect Black and White and Perfect Portrait. It's going to let you edit the masks, the filters, all the different layers that you're working with after the fact. You can go back in and change something if you change your mind. And that re-editability is a really exciting new feature in the Perfect Photo Suite 9. I really want to make this image all about Andy. So in this case, instead of dynamic contrast, which is my normal go-to filter in Perfect Effects, I'm going to start with lens blur. And I really want to isolate Andy and also darken the edges of this image a little bit because they're a bit bright, especially on the right. So the Big Softy Vignette blur filter is going to be exactly what the doctor ordered for this image, I think. And I'm going to just adjust the shape of it down to where it's a little bit narrower. We don't want it that much ovalized. I can grab these control points and just really sort of shape it around Andy. And I can drop it down in here. And then I can grab the edge and adjust, how quickly it's blending from clean to a blur. So I'm just sort of adjusting how much of it's blurred, how much of it's not blurred, where that adjustment's taking place. I kind of want to get the pipe into that region that's blurring a little bit, that handrail. And then I can adjust how much blur there is. I can turn it down to where there's no blur applied. I can turn it up to where it's obscenely blurred and looks very odd. And I want to get something that looks kind of natural right in the middle there. Yeah, I'm really liking that. I think that looks nice. It makes Andy stand out. And you can see the mask that's being applied right here. I might actually go back in and just move it just a skosh to the left and drop the top of it down just a little bit closer in like that. Yeah, I'm really liking that. Now I'm going to go to the little plus button here in my filter stack and add another filter. And just to make him stand out a little more, I'm going to use an adjustment brush. And I'm going to lighten just Andy in this image. So I'm essentially going to use this filter to dodge a little bit, and I love the way that Perfect Effects 9 does this. It basically creates a lighter layer in my filter stack and masks it completely black and then sets my brush automatically to paint the effect in. And because I'm dodging, I want to do it very lightly. A little goes a long way. So I'm going to turn the opacity of my brush way down. I'm doing that by just clicking and scrubbing. Essentially, if I click on opacity, I can just move my mouse left or right, and I'm going to come down to about a 10 opacity, somewhere, it doesn't have to be perfect. And then the bracket keys make my brush larger or smaller, and I'm just going to kind of start painting some lightness into Andy's face and his red shirt. And his arms. I just want to make him stand out a little bit. And I might do one more pass. We're just going to add a little lightness without really overdoing it. And it's subtle, but it really makes them stand out. You take a look now at what we had originally and what we have now. Wow, we are definitely making this image all about Andy, and we've done it quickly and simply. Now I'm going to do one more filter here. I'm adding another filter to my stack. And I'm going to go into Color Enhancer, and I'm going to choose the Green Enhancer. And I really want to make this foliage pop. So as this comes up, it often overdoes it a little bit to my taste. I like to take the layer opacity of my green enhancer and pull it down to about 50%, and then take the green hue that it adds down just a touch. And then I get a little bit more natural look, but it still really makes that vegetation pop, and now that we're up in the Pacific Northwest rainforest. And I love it. I click apply. And Perfect Photo Suite 9 is going to save all of these filters, masks, and effects and round trip me right back into Lightroom where I can organize it right next to my original RAW file. Now I'm going to go back into the library module of Lightroom to get back into our slideshow of the adventure. And after we got to the top of this rope ladder, we found ourselves in these beautiful woods and the headlands. And there was a little bit of mist, and these God rays came streaming through the trees through the mist. And at this time of day, the sun's a little high to shoot straight into the sun without getting a lot of flare and artifacts. So I used this tree to kind of block the most intense part of the sun. This is the RAW file. I love it, but just using ON1's Perfect Effects 9, I was able to add some dynamic contrast to make those rays really stand out, and I used a sky enhancer to bring some of the blue out of the sky. And then once again a green enhancer like we did in the image of Andy climbing up the ladder to just really get this image to pop, and I really love how it turned out. We dropped back down to the beach and we got to this area called Strawberry Point where we were going to camp for the night, and I started scouting, and one of the things that I saw that I loved was this sea stack out to sea. It kind of looked like a giant looking out to sea. I called it Sleeping Giant. And then I found this beautiful shape in the driftwood in the roots of one of these big downed trees. Had these gorgeous patterns in the foreground, and I loved the way that the arch was set up. And afterwards, when I got home, I actually took this scouting image in and added some dynamic contrast and Perfect Effects, and then did a black and white, perfect black and white 9 transition with it. And I really kind of like the effect. It's got this great gritty look to it to me. But it was just really a scouting image, and I just got lucky with bringing it back in and finding something fun to do with it in Perfect Photo Suite 9. I was just playing around in the driftwood. I kind of like this image of Peter. It shows how we were just kind of having fun out there. And then I kind of used that same log as a little study in black and white with one of my scouting images. And so, we got camp set up and waited for the good light. And when it hit, I had some locations. This is how I generally try to approach it. If I can get to a location early enough to scout where I think is going to be good at sunset. So I had these spots I wanted to really focus on. And I love this driftwood sunset. And then as the light got even better lower, I zoomed out with my 70 to 200 and took this shot of the sleeping giant looking out to sea there. And in Perfect Effects here, I added some dynamic contrast to make the water really pop there, and a fall color enhancer to just get that color in the sky popping a little bit. This is a nearly 300-degree panoramic merger. You've got that log that I was using earlier looking both ways up and down the beach, and you've got the driftwood on the left here, and there's the giant in the sunset. This is I think it's, 14, 18 frame panoramic merger with the D800, and it's really fun. You can see how many jellyfish are washing up on these beach and drying out. There's so much life on this undisturbed stretch of coast. And then as the sun really went low, I love this shot of the giant out there looking out at the sunset. And once again, all these edited images have been through ON1's Perfect Suite 9. This one, I'm sure I used some fall color enhancer in the sky and masked it out of the foreground. Some dynamic contrast, definitely to get all the pop and the just that vibrance in the image. It gives you a little sharpening. It gives you a little dynamic contrast pop in the midtones, and I think I might have used the HDR filter real soft in Perfect Effects to just bring a little more shadow detail out in this rock. The next morning was kind of dull, and so we just set off down the beach towards our next section and bid adieu to our friend Peter, who was actually heading back into town. He had work that he had to get to. And Andy and I hiked on down. We crossed another couple headlands. We had some more rope sections to climb, and then we got to our second camp spot at this really famous place called Toliak Point, which is in the middle of this long stretch of wild coast. And it's just, you're surrounded with sea stacks in this location. Here's Andy doing a little film work, and then I set out. I found the place I wanted, which is right about where Andy's set up here. It's kind of out on a little isthmus that you have to climb out to. And I set up and created this 360-degree panoramic merger, and you can actually see that this point in the image and this side is essentially the same as this. And if you're interested in how I used my D810 to create this 360-degree ultra-high resolution panoramic merger, there's a perfect inspiration that I did just before this one that really focuses on this image. So just look through the archive and there it'll be. And I was real excited about sunset at this spot, but it wound up being a less dramatic sunset than I had been hoping for. So instead of creating an ultra wide angle image or a panoramic merger at sunset that evening, I wound up zooming in on where the action was. There was just a little bit of color around the sun as it dropped down through the gap at the edge of the cloud, and I I used a 1.4 teleconverter on my 70 to 200 millimeter lens to really bring that in close. And here you can see some dynamic contrast applied in Perfect Effects to really highlight that. And after supper at about, I don't know, 9 o'clock at night or something, as the blue hour set in, about an hour after sunset, might have been a little earlier than that. There's a point right before space goes black. It's about an hour after sunset, and the stars and space and clouds all get nice and blue. And I set up and did this 30-second long exposure to like blur the clouds, blur the water in the foreground, and I was really surprised to get the look of a sunset in the image, because the lights of La Push, it's a little town up to the north of us, actually lit everything with a tungsten glow like a sunset on the far horizon. It was just kind of this neat thing that I found on the back of the camera. And the next morning was a relatively dull gray morning, so we started hiking towards our last camp at Mosquito Creek, and along the way I had a couple of nice opportunities to photograph wildlife. That once again, having the camera right ready and handy as you pack along is a great thing to do while you're trekking along. Otherwise you miss these wildlife shots that are fleeting. And as we came into Mosquito Creek, it was late in the day and we could see that the clouds were really clearing out. And I started to get excited that maybe there was going to be the possibility of getting some star and Milky Way shots that night along the coast. It was something I'd really been hoping for on the trip. So I started scouting and taking some images of some motion blurred water with rocks in the headland and some of the amazing shapes. And then I noticed as I was out scouting that the rocks right around here are actually a rookery for cormorants. And I went out and was able to capture some kind of fun images of them at a half-second shutter speed. Took a lot of frames because the birds are moving and you have to wait for them to be still. And I shot it both horizontal and vertical, so that sometimes magazines would like it one way, sometimes another. Sometimes you want to print it one way, sometimes another. It's nice to get variety. And I found this massive old-growth stump that was leaned up against the cliffs on the edge of the beach. And sometimes this shows just how it's important to put a human being in there for scale to see just how big something is. And this is one I want to work on really quickly to show you how fast you can edit a raw image in Perfect Effects and get it to really snap and pop. This is the raw image straight from the camera. I was being careful not to blow out the sky. And it's amazing how much shadow detail our modern sensors have. Here we have my little raw edits here. I've boosted shadows, pulled the highlights down, added a little bit of exposure, set my black and white point, and we are ready to right click this image or control click on the Mac and move right into editing it in Perfect Photo Suite 9. Now, in nearly every image I work on in Perfect Effects, the first filter I reach for is dynamic contrast, and my starting point is usually the natural preset. But then once it's been applied, wow, look at that, just bam, you've got so much more sharpness, detail, crispness. It just really sets an image out. I like to play with whether it's affecting the small details, and usually I add a little bit since the natural setting has no dynamic contrast in the small details. And then I'll play with medium. That's a bit much for me, but I would like to add a little bit more than the standard setting. And then, I'll play with large details. This is going to affect those big waves in the sea and the edge of earth and sky. I'm going to pull back just a little bit, still adding a little bit more than the natural preset. And an environmental portrait like this, I always want to be careful of affecting someone's face, particularly my own here in this self-portrait. But in this case, I'm so small that it really doesn't matter. Now here in this image, I have a little bit of an orange glow on the horizon, and I want to really pull that out a little bit. I'm going to add another filter here by pressing the plus like I just did, and I'm going to reach in the color enhancers for Fall Color Enhancer and have a look at what that does to my sky. Now that's a bit extreme for me. I like the look, but it's a little too much. So I'm going to tone the hue down just a little bit, like I often do with my green enhancer, and then I'm going to drop the layer opacity just a touch. Just a little bit more there. Yeah, that's a great look. And then I feel like I need to brighten myself in this image just a little bit. Actually, maybe overall in the shadows. I'm going to go into the tone enhancer. I'm adding another filter to my filter stack, and I'm just gonna make the shadows a little bit lighter. So as I come into here, I see shadows lighter as one of my filter presets for the tone enhancer. And there it is, boom. I love how this has affected the image. Now, it's all very subtle, each shift that we've made, but take a look at what the before looked like. Now look at the after. That really set this image out, and it's just taken us a couple of moments. I hit apply, and we're round tripped right back into Lightroom. And it's so dramatic, the difference between that raw and that Perfect Effects edit. I just love it. Easy, bam, beautiful. So we sat around, had a fire, waited for dark, and got some really amazing star images. Look for a future Perfect Inspiration about these Olympic Coast star Milky Way shots. The next morning we woke up, it was a little bit gray, but still a beautiful morning. I got out and shot a little bit. And on our final little stretch on the way home, we were fortunate enough to see a sea otter and have some adventures rock hopping around a point, timing waves with all of our equipment on our backs. Was it a little hairball? Sure, but it was also a really fun adventure. I think Andy's face kind of says it all. So, hey, that's about it for this particular Perfect Inspiration episode. I want to thank On1 for inviting me to do these videos, as well as for creating the software that I love to use to finish my images. With every new version of the suite, it gets more powerful, it gets more intuitive, and I'm able to quickly and easily get exactly the look that I want so that I'm spending more time in the field shooting and less sitting at the computer editing. Thanks to everyone for watching. Can't wait to see you in the next Perfect Inspiration episode. Thanks.